Alright, hello, good day to anyone who is watching this. So, today, I wanted to talk about some different things. I didn't know how best to summarize it in the title, so I just chose like Marionettes, Spectacle, and the Gift of Suffering. As far as the Marionettes part, um, I'm going to talk about just my experiences with different kind of subgroups or sections of society that I've had experience with, and just what I've seen with a lot of those groups and how that ties into some of the narratives out there, and I'll just kind of talk about my thoughts on why some of those things are going on. How that pertains to just society and all of that good stuff, and how that ties in with the idea of the society of the spectacle. How I think a lot of things going on are really just about appearances. It seems like there's really not a lot of substance going on in a lot of cases, um, and how that plays out with all these different factions and groups out there saying one thing or another, kind of with the quote unquote woke, anti woke stuff and political correctness, how that all works, and why I think there's just like not that much nuanced discussion on it, and it's easy for people to fall into these really simplistic tropes of to explain things, or why they think certain things are going on in society or what have you. So I'll just talk about that, and the last topic of the gift of suffering will basically just be me talking about some of the things that I've gone through in life, and how I've actually come to see those things as a gift over time. I certainly didn't for a long time. And yeah, I'll just get into that. And yeah, hopefully try to tie all these things together. I feel like they're connected in some way, but that might not come across that well. So we'll just have to see, won't we? So, with that, I'm gonna bring up this image. Why, you may ask? Why am I looking at the cover of an NSYNC album? No strings attached, to be specific. Well, firstly, in this image, the members of NSYNC are shown to be marionettes, and that's that kind of ties in with my whole topic there of how I see things playing out in society or what have you. And there's also entertainment value. To be honest, like this kind of nostalgia just kind of brings back positive memories in some way. Positive associations with with that time. I guess I think this album came out in like 2000 or 2001. And frankly, that was a good time in life for me, and to be honest with you. So I think I need the strength of the members of NSYNC. I feel like it's in this nostalgia is giving me strength to have to try and parse through all this different these issues I'm trying to talk about here, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it well. We'll see. And to be real, like in full disclosure, I totally had this CD back when people bought CDs, if you remember that time. If you don't, you're probably a Gen Z or a Zoomer, and I hate you. Anyway, so uh, just keep that image up there. I mean, yeah, I feel like a lot of people are kind of marionettes, puppets, however you want to describe it. Um, except they're not as attractive as these folks here. If by attractive you think highlights and or frosty tips are attractive. Is that what it's called? Frosty tips? I'm not even sure anymore, to be honest with you. Um, but yes, there they are. And you see the marionette strings there. I think the distinction between a marionette and a puppet is just that, the strings are used with marionettes and puppets are just, I guess, are not used, they don't use strings, they just use like the Elmo type puppet thing or whatever the fuck. Anyway, enough stalling. So this is kind of like a complicated thing to try and talk about, but um, lately I have been engaging more with internet, just internet socialization. I don't even know if it's necessarily considered social media, but just like in general, engaging in certain communities and all of that stuff, and talking with more people than I had been in a while. And unfortunately, it kind of reminded me why I had stopped engaging in those communities for a while, because I don't know, I always just run into shit that is like, I don't know, I'm like, why am I here? Why am I dealing with this shit? Because I really, I don't know, I have a low tolerance for just like nonsense, and I guess that's why I'm like, I have a pretty low like threshold for socialization in general. But anyway, um, yeah, as far as like certain narratives, right, with political correctness, what now seems to fall under this umbrella term of like woke, which that's the issue. Like woke seems to mean just about anything that certain people don't like or what have you. So I really don't want to use that term because I don't think it's really precise. I think political correctness is actually like a more precise term for what I'm trying to talk about here. So even though it's like longer to say, I'll probably try to use that, or I guess I could say PC. But yeah. So like there's always these narratives with the woke anti woke stuff. All these so like the narratives, the counter narratives out there, and what's brought up a lot by like the whatever might be called the anti woke crowd. I just said I wasn't gonna use woke, but whatever. But yeah, so the anti woke crowd, will talk a lot about again, quote unquote, the left, which is another term that has no meaning anymore. But speak about this so-called left and certain the political correctness type stuff that's prominent in a lot of those spaces now, and it's not new per se, but it's been like building over the years, and I wanted to just try to talk about it in a way that kind of brings more nuance to the conversation, even though I think there is like a kernel of truth to some of the like criticisms or just some of the shit talking that comes out of like certain people about the so-called left, because I have been around certain sections of the left and stuff like that, and certain groups, you know, that would be broadly called leftist over the years, and I have to admit that I have seen like a lot of these things, and I really didn't want to like, talk about it for a while because I kind of wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt and not just like pile on and but I mean over time I kind of do start to like have these feelings of like, God, this is just weird, this is there's the term degenerate thrown out there, which I don't like that. I don't want to use that term too much because like it kind of has a connotation with like, moral, just like moral, um, I don't know, a lack of morals, or especially like related to sex and whatnot. And that's not really what I mean when I like when I talk about some of these like things. Like I don't really care about like the moral aspect too much, because like to me it is more just about like political correctness and trying to use this like authoritarian way of way to like convince people to change their opinions about things. I don't know. I mean, I guess that could be considered moralizing in a way, but I mean, again, in like a different way, not just like, oh, they're perverts or this and that, right? Because that is how it's used a lot. And I don't think it really has to do with that, with like perversion. It's just, you know, um, just this kind of what I think is really kind of reverting to an infantilization of people, and like really um, not encouraging kind of that victim mentality and all of that stuff. So um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as yeah, as far as uh, what I've seen is um, like, yeah, things that seem to have increased over time, like as far as political correctness. Like, it started out with supposedly like with feminism, right? That's what gets blamed. Like feminism has caused all these like social, uh, you know, maladies, or just this weirdness or whatever. However they want to, certain people want to portray it. But to me, it's really not. Again, it's not about like just an ideology or just feminism. Like to me, it's about just a breakdown in like ability to communicate with different people. I mean, especially communicate with people who have differing opinions from yourself or whatever. And to me, that's like at the core of it, more than just like it's this evil ideology that's being forced on people or whatever. I think a lot of it is more just this lack of understanding, right? And a lack of flexibility in like how people try to go about changing opinions or whatever, changing hearts and minds or whatever you want to say. Because frankly, like the way a lot of these folks go about it is really not helpful at all. And I don't, as time has gone on, I really don't know why more people in those sections haven't recognized that, or do they just, or if they just don't want to. I don't know. It is strange, but before I get too deep into it, I will play a clip that kind of illustrates a little bit of what I'm talking about. And this clip was from a DSA, or Democratic Socialists of America conference from a few years ago, and I couldn't find like I couldn't find the original clip that's in this video, but Lucy from Blue Moon Red Wine had made a video talking a little bit about that, and she plays it in her video, so hopefully you can like see it well enough. But it's worth checking out Lucy's channel. The links in the description to that video, and her channel Blue Moon Red Wine is definitely worth following and checking out and all that. And so I'm gonna play that.
that, that's really important. So please don't clap, shoot up these. Very brief point of information. If you are using a microphone, talk into it directly like I am right now, and do not wave your face back and forth because people cannot hear you. That is all.
Okay, awesome.
Can I reiterate that we, for the sake of our comrades who have sensory issues, refrain from hissing, loudly shouting out your opinion on a vote, or waving banners and signs that reflect your vote in front of people?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Point of privilege. No question of privilege. I just want to remind people to watch their tone of voice while discussing this very heated topic. I noticed that some of the individuals from the disability working group were looking incredibly stressed out, possibly on the verge of tears. And I know that people feel very strongly about this, but keep in mind, focus on the content of what you're saying, and watch the tone that you say it with.
Point of privilege.
Yes.
This is Madison Sheeher from Harrisburg. I just wanted to remind people that, like I know during the last one we voted not to take that extra 5 minutes, but I just wanted to remind people that some people have issues processing things, and it would be, we are just perpetuating ableism by not allowing people the time to look at, to consider resolutions that previously weren't on the agenda and then were amended onto one that was. So just keep that in mind going forward, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Personal privilege. Some of us came from very far away. We're here to vote on stuff. So what are we going to do about all of the rest of the stuff that we have to vote on? Because some of us have planes to catch tomorrow, and we can have a lot of money to, add on to that. So what are we proposing to do? Yeah.
Point of personal privilege. Some of us have certain disabilities that do not allow us to stay in here for hours on end to make these resolutions. We need some sort of a break. We need to call it a day. Some of us need time to recharge. We cannot go on like this forever. I am one of them. This is what we were talking about earlier with the lack of accessibility in TSA. We need to take these into consideration, people.
Alright, so, yeah, that showed some of, like, these things that, get made fun of a lot by, the so-called, anti-woke crowd, whoever that is, and, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying, it's easy to just, like, look at it and make fun of it and all that, and that's, most of what's out there, but I'm really, like, interested in, like, why this is, like, happening, where it came from, because, obviously things like this weren't always around that way, and it is, pretty prominent, like, it's not just, like, it's still a minority, but it is prominent, like, within the, so-called left, in the US, and maybe some other, Western countries, Canada, or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, I just want to, like, make it clear, I'm not, like, trying to just make fun of those people, bringing up some of those things about, like, supposed disabilities and all of that stuff. But, there is an issue when, there are natural limits to things, right? So if you're in, like, this organization, you're trying to do certain things, there's limits to what can be done. You really can't cater to every single person. I mean, as you kind of even saw in that short clip there, people are going to have, like, conflicting, needs or desires. So what are you going to do, There's just no way realistically to placate everyone, and that's kind of what it comes down to for me, and, like, why it's such a foolish thing to be so into, like, this, whatever you want to call it. It's like political correctness on steroids, or just, like, to me it is very, like, infantile. Like, it really is, like, treating people or people wanting to be treated like they're literally infants and they cannot do anything themselves. They need, everyone to cater to their needs. And like I said, I think it's a minority, but it is prominent in certain, left spaces like the DSA types, and for example, um, it's one example I can give that kind of does show that, the change, like, that I've observed change is, like, what's called the LGBTQ community. I kind of put quotes on community because to me, like, community kind of implies a certain amount of, like, cohesiveness or something like that, and like, in reality it's not a very cohesive community. I think, like, calling it a population is probably more accurate, because yeah, I mean, it's not that cohesive. Like, there's a lot of different people with different opinions on things. Again, like, conflicting opinions on things, and a lot of people who don't even, like, want to be lumped in, right, with that acronym of LGBT. Um, and but the way it's portrayed, in the mainstream and stuff like that, and to most people, right, I mean, most people, if they're not within that acronym, within that population, they probably don't know a lot more about it than what's put out there in, like, mainstream sources. And they probably don't know, like, the extent of all the complexity of it. Like I was just saying, the differences in that people are not all the same within that, and do not share all, like, the same opinions and values and all of that stuff. And so yeah, personally, like, as someone who, like, does happen to fall, like, within that whole population, right, like, I don't really, like I said, I'm not personally big on, like, identities, so it's not, like, that's not something I talk about a lot, and it's not, I don't have that need of, like, having a label, having an identity, which is itself its own, like, thing that I've seen increase, like, just, like, almost fetishizing these identities. Like, the identity has become, like, a commodity, a commodity of sorts, or, like, just a real fixation for a lot of people. And I think there's a lot of possibilities, like, why that is. I don't know. My thoughts are, that people are kind of just desperate for something to hold on to again. Like, if they feel like, the political world and whatever, like, especially post 2016, when, supposedly the shock win of Donald Trump, to, yeah, I guess it was a shock to certain people. It wasn't to me, to be honest, because I'm not, I don't live in, like, an echo chamber, but to people who are in, like, this, in certain echo chambers, they really were shocked. And so I think after that there was this, like, desperation for a lot of people, like, on the liberal, progressive side, or whatever you want to call it, to associate with things that kind of give them, that allow them to differentiate themselves from, like, a mainstream American identity or something like that. And yeah, I think that's part of it, that people are just seeking these niche groups, and to feel like they belong. Obviously, that's at the core of a lot of things. A lot of these group identities, whether they're, these things that are called woke, or their traditional identities, there's always this, like, need for that, and within a lot of people, apparently. And so yeah, I mean, I've seen that change. So, like, I was saying, I've been, like, in certain, like, spaces, especially online, because I did start out, like, really engaging online. And this was, like, at least 15 years ago. And I can just say that it was very different. Like there wasn't this level of political correctness, over the top, just like hypersensitivity towards everything you say. And that's kind of what that embodies to me. The whole PC culture is like, it is. I mean, that's the irony of it. Is it's very like authoritarian, very like rigid and strict, and it to me it really is like the other side of the coin of what they supposedly are fighting against, traditionalism, right? I mean, they're fighting against being forced into like traditional roles or traditional ideas or concepts or all of those things, various stripes. But they then turn around and they want to impose, really heavy handedly a lot of their opinions, their beliefs and their ideals and concepts on the whole population. And I mean, we've all seen this and all that. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, it's put out there as just kind of a. I mean, it is a distraction in some ways, but it is also, like I said, it is a real thing too. And like I said, personally, it has been like kind of just depressing and disappointing to see that, like to see that attitude really take over, all of these like, the LGBT spaces or whatever you want to call them, right? Because there really isn't like a lot of dissent like within that. I mean, like I was saying, like from the outside people don't know, and even from within that population people don't, there isn't really a diversity of like viewpoints on that. Like there is an attitude of like, if you don't have the if you're not virtue signaling the correct opinion, the most PC, quote unquote woke opinion, you will get like smacked down. You will get like kicked out of spaces, and people will just like dismiss you as like, oh, you're conservative or some shit, which I'm just not. Like I don't have a there's like, it's just like physically impossible for me to be conservative. Like there are conservative people within that whole community, but again, like I said, I'm not on into all that whole paradigm, right? Just the left, right, or liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican paradigm, because it's all trash. Like whether you're within like a certain population, a certain community, or just in general, there's no use to aligning with any of that shit. But yeah, I mean, again, you can't have like a nuanced discussion about that without being just written off as like, oh, you must just be like a Republican or what have you. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just an example of it like actually being a thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's not good. Like I kind of resisted like really talking about it for a long time because I did want to just think, oh, it's just a tiny fraction of people. It's really not a big deal. It's whatever. But it has grown. It has gotten worse. I would say over the last like 5 years, especially 5 to 10 years, like it really has taken over. And so yeah, that's all you'll see portrayed by the mainstream, and even within that population, like anyone who criticizes it is really shoved to the margins. And it's just pretty sad because it's, to me, like there's no reason to yeah, I mean, the idea of embracing such a authoritarian outlook, like I was saying, like the way what PC culture is, just saying you have to say things this way and do things this way, otherwise you're this, that, and the other, you're toxic, you're conservative, you're I don't know what. It's really absurd, and it definitely wasn't like that even 15 years ago, which isn't that long ago. And yeah, so I mean, I wonder why, what exactly is behind all this. And to be honest, like sometimes I think like I said, it's about the communication, right? Because like there is this lack of there is like a disconnect when I've tried to engage some of these people, like some of these like the, I guess you could call this social justice warrior types, right? The keyboard warriors who swoop in and you know, try and just get upset over every little thing. Like whenever I've tried to engage those people, you know, within those spaces, within like the LGBT whatever spaces, groups. Like I said, I was, you know, I had gone back to some online and regretted it pretty quickly, because yeah, you're not allowed to question anything. You're not allowed to, you know, just ask for even like an explanation of the logic behind, you know, all these things, you know, whatever you know, rules they have. You can't do any of that without them getting, you know, flipping out into a tantrum and making you out to be, you know, a villain of some kind, and it's just really insane. And you know, it's pretty sad. But as far as the, yeah, I mean, so they can't communicate about it. They can't think critically about it. You know, asking them to think critically is basically just you know, they'll call it like invalidating. There's always that term of validation. You know, it's, and so to me again, like I was talking about in my last video, it's this imbalance, right? Imbalance between like the left and right brain, or it's sometimes called like the left brain is sometimes referred to as like the masculine side, and the right brain is sometimes referred to as the feminine side. And you know, I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it. You know, of course it, you know, is like a stereotypical way, but also there's some truth to it. Like again, I'm not here to say, you know, I'm not an essentialist. I'm not here to say like men are like this, women are like this. But also, like, you know, I don't think it's harmful to acknowledge like there can be some correlation. Like, yeah, maybe a lot of men have a certain characteristic, a lot of women have certain characteristics, and that's not necessarily, you know, again, I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to like, you know, exclude people. That was what I was told in a space a few days ago. Like, if you don't make that super explicitly clear that everyone is different and all that stuff, that, you know, they shouldn't be characterized into those groups, into that binary, then you're just, you know, some horrible villain. And like I said, I don't even disagree with that, and yet just, I don't know, the way I, you know, go about it is not enough, apparently, and that's why it's just such a fucking cesspool, you know, doesn't go anywhere ever. So yeah, I mean, I think part of it is academia, right? I think a lot of these ideas come out of you know, universities, you know, the so-called liberal arts and all that. And I can't speak too much to that because I did not even go to college. Because I had a feeling like when I was younger that it was bullshit, and it seems like I was right. But yeah, I mean, there is this weird like I don't know, just this weird like section of subset of people who like come up with these ideas, and they get put out there, you know, from all these like sociology classes and gender studies classes, and then they get put out there, and somehow, yeah, they've managed to take over a lot of these spaces that are associated with the so-called left, whether it's, you know, DSA, like progressive spaces, or all of that stuff. And yeah, and again, the imbalance is really not conducive for like harmony, right? I don't think it's conducive to harmony, like even within an individual, because like I said, I'm not too hot on the idea of like society, so I'm not here saying like this is bad for society. Like, I honestly don't even care about, you know, necessarily how that affects society as such. But like I said, like for the individuals involved, like it makes them fucking insufferable to people who are not like also within their echo chamber, right? I mean, like I said myself, like I don't even disagree with most of the shit that they talk about, but like again, like you like the most minor thing will get you, quote unquote canceled basically. And I just wonder what the causes are, because again, I don't think people are necessarily like using a free will choice. They decide to become into all of this stuff. So I look for like what is the underlying social reason for all this stuff. But and frankly, like sometimes I wonder, if like people are just damaged like in a biological way from like different chemicals in the environment coming from different sources, whether you are, whether you've studied like the chemtrail stuff or GMOs or things coming through certain medical interventions that I'm not gonna talk about too explicitly, because I don't necessarily want the video to get pulled, to get struck or whatever. But yeah, I mean, because to me there is, because okay, so there is this relation with autism, right? And that's another thing we've heard more and more about. I mean, frankly, I didn't hear anything about autism until I was like out of high school. So that's only like how many years now? Like 15 or so years, or a little less than that. So and there is a lot of crossover, and that's another thing I can say I've observed myself. There's a crossover with people who are super into the PC stuff, who are, also into this, like, everything has to be made accessible for all of this whole host of, like, issues, like you saw in that video clip with the DSA. I have sensory issues, I have Asperger's. I can't recognize, body language. I can't recognize tone. Like all of these things, I can't hear clapping. Clapping is violence because, it hurts my, just all of these things that, to me, are just over the top. And like I said, realistically, you cannot placate to all of these things at one time. And, like I said, if someone has issues with that stuff, like, that's, they can, I'm not saying they can't ask for accommodation ever, but again, like, there's just natural limits to when and where that can happen realistically. And I don't think it makes it violence. I don't think it makes someone a bad person if they are not necessarily willing to go along with every little thing. And that's where, like, this issue of, like, where do you draw the line between being like, trying to really, respect where people are coming from, care for people, and when is it like kind of too much? Because like I talked about in my last video, like I am someone who, I do try to see the best in people, and I try to help people, and so for me, like, I guess that's why I was like reluctant to really want to address this for a long time, because I don't want to be, an asshole. I don't want to just like be like, oh, your issue is not a big deal. But lately, more and more I have been feeling like there's got to be a line somewhere. And to me, like, as I've thought about this, like, it is, like I said, it's crossing, the line from just like needing help with something to just literally going full like infantilism. I don't know, wait. Couldn't even get that word out. Just like, complete like childlike behavior. Like, if you're an adult, I don't know, it is like this weird, really infantile thing of like wanting your hand to be held all the time. You can't, that you can't do anything. Everything is trauma. Everything is violence. Everything is, aggression when it's, that those the way they use those terms are just in such a are such a are so divergent from, excuse me, so divergent from how they've been used, right? I mean, what is trauma? Is trauma like, you know uh an Uber, you calling an Uber and it comes late, or I mean, yeah, or having a somebody like a somebody who wears like a ton of cologne, is that now traumatizing? Is that aggression? I mean, all of these things, like I regularly, I do hear people saying things like, men take up too much space, men sitting with their legs spread apart is microaggression, and when you're getting into that territory, and this has been brought up by a lot of people as well, and not talked about enough from this like kind of nuanced perspective, that it does dilute the real issues, right? It does dilute like issues of feminism, right, or whatever, like what feminism was supposed to be originally about, just like in general, not having like strict rules saying what you can and can't do just based on your gender. It does dilute the real issues there. I would say like there are, some people, obviously certain people like totally dismiss it or whatever. I think there's still issues there, like, but they're very material things. They're not these really kind of abstract things that are just totally based in like only feelings and not anchored in fact. And that's kind of the thing. It's like, I don't like to dismiss, I'm not coming from a perspective of like, only facts, because first of all, like, whose facts, like that term is already kind of fluid, and it's not as solid as certain people like to make it out to be. Like that is coming from kind of like that left brain, like, you only understand things in a very empirical way, and I'm not coming from that perspective. But like I said, there's got to be some balance, there's got to be a line somewhere. And so when things aren't like, there isn't like an anchor of some kind in like kind of observable reality, or whatever, it kind of is too much, it is kind of imbalanced. So like, for example, the issue of like the fact that in like the US and other places, I'm sure, most high paying jobs are still held by men, right? And there is a real reason for that. It is because not just, not sexism, not patriarchy per se, but just the fact that because they're jobs that are, again, like left brain jobs, they are technical, they are jobs that serve like the most moneyed interests. They serve, the interests of production, of consumer capitalism, money that makes money, like banking, and or things that are very profitable, like software, all that stuff, tech workers at the high levels. Yeah, I mean, lawyers, because those, lawyers directly serve the state, and, especially ones who work in corporate law, like, exactly. I mean, a lot of those jobs are still held by men, and women, again, typically, hopefully it's not too sexist to say, but yeah, I think a lot of women prefer jobs that have, like, more meaning. They're not as kind of left-brained, like they, could be care jobs, like a nurse, a teacher, social worker, what have you, and those jobs do tend to pay less, or service jobs, for sure pay less. Um, and that's why you still do have those kinds of divides. And there was, I don't have the survey on hand right now, um, but I have heard that surveys in recent years have shown that like households with like a gay male couple make more money than like a male female couple. And it is because, like, again, men tend to have a higher paying job. So yeah, if you have a household with two men, they probably will be making more money than a straight couple household. And yeah, I mean, so that's something that is real, something that is getting obfuscated by the things that are very just, I don't know, don't, to me, really don't seem useful at all. And it's hard to blame people for getting like turned off to some of these concepts, um to like the concept of like sexism, feminism. Like, why are these things going on? And like I said, it's not even just about like discrimination. Like, to me, it is about like, why is our society set up like that certain jobs are more valued than other jobs, and you could be a male in a job that's like like I said, a care oriented job, like a nurse or a medical assistant, or someone who works in like a nursing home. I had a friend who was a guy who worked in a nursing home, and he was like one of like two men in like out of the whole workforce there. And like, yeah, they don't make shit money. They get paid like minimum wage basically. If you're and you do like a shit ton of work, you do all that, the dirty work that the doctors or whoever who make more money don't want to do. You have to give people sponge baths and all that shit. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's not because of like the difficulty of work or whatever. Every job can be difficult, especially in a society that's obsessed with like production and doing things like faster and faster, and companies, and even, well, hospitals are run by companies or run like companies. Yeah, they do demand more and more of people. So it's annoying to see people like dismiss certain jobs as like, oh, you just do this, you just do that. It's like, well, that doesn't tell the whole story, right? Because frankly, people in like a higher paying job, if they're a fucking CEO or something like that, or a tech worker, they're probably more likely to have more like, to take their time, have more free time, like work less overall, like have less stress overall in their workplace, than a lot of like minimum wage workers. So yeah, I mean, it's never that simple. And but yeah, to me, it's like, um yeah, so I mean, just this simplistic stuff out there, the political correctness really takes away from all that. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand why people don't see that. Like, they just double down. Like, the people who promote like the most absurd political correctness stuff will just like double down every time. Like, they never actually stop to think about like you know any of the stuff that I just mentioned, right? So yeah, I mean, um, yeah. Having said all that, like, sometimes, like, yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, more and more I do like kind of get where certain people come from. Like, some of these celebrity streamers out there will say like, all these people on the left are degenerate. And sometimes I am like, yeah, I can't blame you. Like, it's because, especially when, yeah, you can't really please them. Like I said, there's no way to really accommodate everything that they are into. So what can you even do? Like, realistically, I mean, like we just saw with that DSA thing, I mean, realistically, like, if you are trying to get things going in some kind of political movement, you are trying to make things happen, things like that really do hold you back. And it's really not, and there are groups like that are quote unquote on the left, like a socialist and communist groups who are like also against some of this stuff, because they are rooted more in like trying to get things done. They recognize the effect that this whole PC obsession, has had on organizations, they really can keep them from functioning at all. So, I mean, I don't really know what's gonna happen with that. Like, it just seems like a spiral of, like, just this merry-go-round of nonsense that, I don't know how it can be fixed. And, like, I mean, I think I mentioned autism, but yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say, like, negative things about autism. I mean, people with autism, but, um, like I said, I've seen people who say, like, that's the reason they can't, like, they have poor, like, interpersonal skills. And so, again, like, if it's being caused by these external factors, whatever causes that, we can't really talk about that too much. What's causing this explosion in, like, in autism, all these different autism spectrum disorders, what are characterized as that. And they certainly seem to be having a certain kind of effect on people, and it's really, it's hard. It's a pretty sensitive topic to try to talk about, but again, I mean, if people don't address it, like, what's gonna, how is that gonna go? Because frankly, it does seem to play into certain, to certain, like, agendas, or just in general to powerful people. Because if you're in a position where you're so dependent on, like, people around you to, carry you and cater to you at every turn, you know, you're going to be in a pretty vulnerable position, right? I mean, if, being dependent, does leave a person open to that, to being used, manipulated, or, used in whatever way by someone who is going to be dominant, looking to be dominant, like a, any kind of powerful figure or institution or whatever. And so, yeah, having said all that, like, I want to bring up uh, the fact that, what I was talking about, is mostly said about the left, right? But at the same time, the people on the other side, the anti-woke side, like, they're not much better. It's just that the things that they're into are just, different on the surface, but they kind of end up having a similar effect. And that's where the society of the spectacle comes in. Because to me, like, even people, like, because again, it's like, to me, it's like these reactions on reactions on reactions, right? So it's like you had this PC culture come out of something that maybe was, like, a legitimate need, like, yeah, I mean, a need for inclusion, right, of certain people, of like, for sensitivity towards, like, towards people with certain disabilities or whatever. But then, like, maybe it just, like, I mean, it just really got out of hand and went too far, and then you have, a backlash or reaction to that. And that's what we see now with, like, the anti-woke, and then, and people who are like, we just need to go back to traditionalism, we need to go back to, especially, like, traditional gender roles, behaviors, all of this stuff. And that's what we see a ton of now. Also, people who, like, go out of their way to try and, like, show how I mean, how masculine they are, how normal they are, whatever that means, like, how non-woke, non-sensitive, whatever, it may be, the case may be, like. And the problem is that it's mostly just performative, because it's really not, it's also not serving anything concrete. It's not improving anyone's situation or life, where, what has it accomplished? And frankly, yeah, I mean, the irony is that underneath, like, yeah, I mean, to me, it is kind of a front, right? It is this, an aesthetic, and just a performative thing, just like a lot of these things on the left. A lot of the virtue signaling, it happens on left, right, and center because. And okay, well that's where I'm getting at with Society of the Spectacle. And I will read a bit about that. So, the Society of the Spectacle is a 1967 work of philosophy and Marxist critical theory by Guy Debord, in which the author develops and presents the concept of the spectacle. The book is considered a seminal text for the Situationist movement. Debord published a follow-up book, Comments on the Society of the Spectacle, in 1988. Oh shit. Alright. Debord traces the development of a modern society in which authentic social life has been replaced with representation. Quote, all that once was directly lived has become mere representation, unquote. Debord argues that the history of social life can be understood as, quote, the decline of being into having and having into merely appearing, unquote. This condition, according to Debord, is the, quote, historical moment at which the commodity completes its colonization of social life, unquote. The spectacle is the inverted image of society in which relations between commodities have supplanted relations between people, in which, quote, passive identification with the spectacle supplants genuine activity, unquote. The spectacle is not a collection of... the quote, the spectacle is not a collection of images, unquote. Debord writes, quote, rather it is a social relation among people mediated by images, unquote. In his analysis of the spectacular society, Debord notes that the quality of life is impoverished with such a lack of authenticity that human perceptions are affected and an attendant degradation of knowledge, which in turn hinders critical thought. Debord analyzes the use of knowledge to assuage reality. The spectacle obfuscates the past, imploding it with the future into undifferentiated mass, a type of never-ending present in this way, the spectacle prevents individuals from realizing that the society of spectacle is only a moment in history, one that can be overturned through revolution. So, yeah, I mean, like, the whole revolution thing aside, like, the thing that mainly stood out to me is, like, what was just said, right? Going from being to having, and then having to appearing. And I think that really explains a lot of society. Yeah, I mean, there's just this superficiality of everything, like I said, whether it's the left and all of their issues that they try to claim to advocate for, but really it's very superficial. It's all about looking the part, looking like you care about something. It's not about like actually putting things into practice, right? Even like the whole, there is like truth to what people say about how the left became authoritarian. They were supposed to be the ones who were for questioning authority, and now they they became authoritarian themselves. And yeah, it's like instead of like actually embodying certain values, they claim to have certain values, but the way they go about it really contradicts what what they really do. Like I said, with trying to just like impose their views on everyone and all of that stuff. And to me, it's really like the same. Yeah, I mean the two sides of the same coin, right? Like people fighting over having their views being the ones that are enshrined in the law or whatever it is. It's like it's not enough to just say like you believe in a certain thing, and you have certain values, and whatever it is, even with those all that accommodation stuff, it's like you could do that. I'm not saying anyone can't do that. That's the thing. It's like, well, it's up to you. It's up to who you associate with. But trying to force that on everyone is just not gonna work. It's really not helping. And so what I was getting at with like the anti-woke crowd, the one that is like leaning towards this like they've reacted to that stuff, to the quote unquote woke and PC culture, with like, yeah, back to tradition, back to just like rugged individualism and all that stuff. But I mean, that's the problem, is like they're not doing that either, right? Just like we're seeing here, like they're appearing to do that with you know whether it's like that they're stockpiling all these weapons. I mean, you see plenty of people doing that these days. But it's like having those things doesn't make anything happen, right? It doesn't mean you're actually like embodying the value of what you're preaching. Like you're not solving like the core problems of society at all. I mean, and frankly, like an example of this that I saw maybe a year or two ago, when there were, or maybe, yeah, more than that, I guess now. It's been, I don't know, time is so confusing now, but during like lockdowns in certain places, there was this story in, I think, Texas, that a certain city was like, trying to close down their restaurants, and there was this group of these kinds of like militia type people. There's like different groups of those, so I'm not gonna name names because I don't know exactly like which group it was. But there's these militia type people, mostly people who are like former military, former cops, or active military or cops and all that stuff, who came, and they're like, we're gonna defend these businesses, we're gonna keep them open. And they showed up with like weapons and all the tactical gear and all this stuff, and they ended up just like surrendering, actually, like to the cops. Like they got arrested for I don't know, I don't know what they got arrested for, but they basically did just give in to the cops. They didn't do anything. They didn't stop anything from happening. So again, like they look the part. They have all this stuff, and play themselves up to be this certain thing. This back to like the rugged masculinity, whatever. And they end up doing nothing. So frankly, that describes a lot of people in those fields, the police and military, and that's the problem. Like because people can't differentiate between like what are the core issues, like who's causing the problems. Is it just these woke people? Is it these hypersensitive people? I mean, first of all, what does it, how, yeah, it's like if you're shitting on them, you're making fun of them for being hypersensitive, and they're, they can't handle anything, and they need a trigger warning for everything, all this shit. It's like, well, how are they even a threat to you, first of all? Like, that, to me, again, that makes no sense. For the years that we've been seeing this whole, like, woke, anti-woke thing play out, that makes no sense to me, right? Because it's like they want it both ways. They say the left is like this dangerous threat, but it's also these soy boy whatever, weak soy boy types who, I don't know. It's strange. It makes no sense. Like, how can they both be a threat and also be weak and impotent and all of this stuff that they say? So that, first of all, makes no sense. But also, again, like if you're a cop or in the military, who are you serving? I mean, you literally have sworn an oath to defend the government that most of these people also think is the enemy. So again, what are we doing here? You know, I mean, I think a lot of them will claim, like, they want to serve, like, the Constitution or, these ideals. But that's the problem. They're ideals. In practice, they don't exist. So, in reality, in practice, what you're doing is serving the same institutions, the same entity that is at the core of your problems. I mean, not just the government, but also corporations, because, I mean, those two things are basically intertwined in the US at least. So you can't say, like, you're for private business but against the government. Well, all private business is controlled by the government, and frankly, police mainly protect corporate property. So, there's just this lack of understanding of what the actual problems are. They would rather blame everything on, all these other influences, the left, Antifa, illegal immigrants, everything but the actual problem, and that's not that's not an accident. And that's the thing. It's like, so you have these two sides of the same coin, both pretending, thinking, maybe legitimately thinking they're, standing for something, and in the end, in reality, they're not. They're not doing anything that's actually useful, not getting at the actual roots of any of the problems that they even talk about, right? So it's just so fucking strange how this stuff plays out. I mean, like I said, I don't know. It's just being lost in all of this. In the deliberate, miseducation, from schools, from media, everything. I mean, like I said in the last video, it's like just kind of this really messed up soup of just like a never-ending cycle. People just keep falling for the same shit over and over, never putting two and two together. That I mean, what you're doing is just never having an effect, and not having just the insight and the intellectual, like, curiosity or wisdom to, like, step back and actually critically examine, all of these things, like whether it's on the left, virtue signaling about all these issues, feminism and diversity and inclusion, or nothing they do is helping that, and a lot of the things they do is like the opposite. And then the conservative side, traditionalist side, also not getting to the core of the issue. It reminds me of I was following this this fucking alternative media dude who was talking a lot about certain issues around the health event over the last few years, and the mandates of certain interventions and all of that stuff. And I remember kind of like looking through the comments, and this was like an outlet that was like literally bathed in like the flag and all this shit, just the typical like a typical American patriot. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Just the patriot branding, right? That we see so much of. And I mean, I was going through, like, looking at the comments of people, like, on, talking about the mandates and all this stuff. And you would just see people freaking out, being like, oh my god, like, I'm gonna lose my job. I have, I'm only like 2 years away from retiring with a military pension. What should I do? Like, literally kind of crying like children. I'm like, so that's the irony. Like, again, when it comes down to it, they're not anymore, whatever values they think they have, strong, masculine, whatever, they're not any more of that than these, the people they make fun of. So, they're still they're still running around like chickens with their heads cut off, like not knowing what to do, not having the first clue what to, what would actually be effective, and instead, engaging in just like the same kind of, I don't know, desperate rhetoric, like hero worship, like, oh, we just need to elect Trump, or we just need to elect Republicans, and all of that stuff. And yeah, I don't know, man. It's like nothing ever changes. It's like people are so corralled into these patterns. It's like, I don't even know. I really don't. But let me see here. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So again, like, to bring it back to the concept of balance, like, that's the problem, right? We have people who are like trying to project themselves, to be certain things, and at the end of the day, they don't mean anything. They have like no substance, and they're just two sides of the same coin. And I don't know. I'm like at a loss for words about all of it, but yeah, the reason I wanted to bring that up is just to say that, yeah, I mean, I apologize. I'm like fucking at a loss for words, but really, yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen that by this point, just the endless back and forth, and that's what I'm just so tired of, because, I mean, who is doing anything, right? I mean, it's about performance, right? It's about performing these values, like on. You have the people who see themselves as, the traditional, ideal of masculinity, and being opposed, that's being destroyed by feminism, by the left, or whatever it is. But again, like, if you're not taking into consideration like what that's serving, where are you gonna get with that, and until people can recognize that, it's just not gonna improve. I mean, when people think they have a certain value, like these, like the military type people, who think they're if everyone was like them, things would be better. Well, how the fuck would that be true when, people, there's still plenty of people signing up to join the military, and what has that accomplished? I mean, we've had, how many wars have we had? The U.S. has been at war for the last 20 years. I mean, can anyone make an argument that freedom has increased? It's only decreased. But again, like, no one can put that shit together. I really just wonder, like, what it takes to get through to people. Because, I don't know. I don't see how, volunteering to die for, whatever interests the military-industrial complex has changed any of these things. And in a lot of cases, it makes things that they complain about worse. I mean, if they're complaining about immigration, and refugees, well, there wouldn't have been that many refugees if the military hadn't invaded all these different places and stirred up coups and just all of this shit. But no, none of that shit ever gets talked about. It's all about the most superficial level of, like, performing masculinity, performing traditionalism, performing performing all of these things that have no, like, root in reality. And so that's kind of the irony of all of it, is like, it's just as based in emotion as like the so-called woke stuff. I mean, is it not? Like, is it any more based in anything practical? Like, it's all based in delusions. It's just a different kind of delusion. So, yeah, I don't know if anyone has an idea of like I don't know where this is all going. Please let me know because I am just at a loss for words with it. So I'm just going to go on to the last topic I really wanted to bring up, which is the gift of suffering. So, what I mean by that is, in the context of the stuff I was just talking about, to bring it back to that and hopefully make it kind of tie in somehow. You know, I think for me, like just the main reason I've been able to like see through a lot of this stuff is just from like experiences that I've had, because when you've gone through a lot of like just difficult things, like you don't get pulled into just the falseness, right? I mean, you don't have the ability to just like to have concepts and think they mean things, and when they don't, because like you're living in a realm that is like about just really concrete things. It's not about ideals. It's not about values and virtue signaling. It's not about appearing traditional, masculine, anything like that. It's not about any kind of performance or spectacle. It's just reality. And I think, having had like just a lot of difficult things that I've experienced in life, like has really grounded me in that reality. And so I think, frankly, that could be part of the problem that, post World War II, U.S. society is fairly, has been fairly comfortable. It has been, there are people, again, like some of these people on the traditionalist side or whatever, well, like there's this quote I've heard them say that like easy times make for soft men, and soft men, make for hard times, and then hard times make harder, hard men. I don't know where this is going, but yeah, this concept of like people are too soft, and like it kind of makes sense that people have those anxieties because frankly, U.S. society in general has become kind of soft in certain, like I said, in like the most like real ways. Not just about feminism, not about this and that, but in real ways that people are dependent on certain systems. They're dependent on these like supply chains. They're dependent on systems that pull resources from all over the world that are again maintained by like militarism, right? I mean, tropical products that we take for granted if we're living in the U.S., like coffee and certain fruits. Like, if you've heard of the Banana Republic, when the U.S. Military staged a coup in Nicaragua to, kind of gain a monopoly over, banana plantations there. Things like that. Like, people don't know anything about that. And, it is a problem. Like, if people are dependent on those comforts and conveniences, if those things go away, it's not going to be pretty. Once people have a certain thing, they do become pretty dependent on it, and it's hard to imagine not having it if you're just used to having it all the time. So it's like it's not something people are prepared for, really. Um, but but even like psychologically and emotionally and all of those things too, like you know I think there is truth to the idea that like you know what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and so sometimes, yeah, not having a lot of challenges to face and overcome can have can allow people to fall into things that are just fucking just so artificial and superficial and performative and all of those things. I mean, I really didn't have time to fall into a lot of these like empty ideals and simplistic like fantasies that are put forth in the US that that try to keep people corralled into this narrative, right, into all these stories, because I had to deal with a lot. I grew up with a single mom, and she ended up dying when I was still like a teenager. That's it. Really forced me to be somewhat almost completely on my own, like certainly emotionally on my own from like a young age. And I mean, without that, I could see how, so again, like with the going back to the first thing I talked about with the DSA stuff, like I said, they talk a lot about these traumas and stuff, and it's like, frankly, I mean, like I said, I don't like to sound like the person like, oh, you know your trauma is not that bad, but that again, that's the thing, like there's a limit somewhere. There is like a balance. Like you can't just compare anything to anything. You can't compare if your Uber coming 30 minutes late to like be living in poverty, living in a situation where your parents don't always have money for food or for shelter. There are these limits, and so sometimes I do see like kind of oversimplification where people want to say like oh, everyone has their struggles and this and that. It's like, to some degree, yeah, that's true. Like it is a matter of like perspective. Like, yeah, if someone experiences something that's difficult, that it'll be hard for them. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying they don't experience that, but at the same time, there are things that are different. Like it's you can experience a lot of things. Like a lot of things are interpersonal, like struggles like within a family, like with the person's parents or who knows what. But imagine having to deal with that stuff if you also are, are totally financially insecure and you don't have shelter and you don't have food. Like, it's, can you really equate those things? And so, I guess that's what some people call like postmodernism, that like nothing has any meaning. And so, I don't know, I'm like not versed on all that shit. But like I said, I mean, to be fair, like, even as much as I try to be, as open to, what people's experiences are, like, sometimes it is too much. Like, sometimes, it's different. Like, you can't really imagine what it's like to live on the street, like to literally not have shelter, to not have food, to not have money to buy whatever necessities. Like, I mean, and I experienced that myself. Like, and like I said, I didn't even grow up that well. I didn't grow up like well off or anything like that. I grew up probably like lower middle class at best. And even for me, I still had these ideas in my head about what, homeless people were like, and why people are homeless, and all of these things that, you'll see floating around by, said by people who obviously haven't experienced it. That they're all just crazy people. They're all they're all lazy, crazy, I don't know what. They like it. They like being homeless. People will say that because of like, sometimes like here in Seattle, like if cops do a sweep of a place where people have set up like tents, and the city will say like, oh, well, we have enough shelter beds, And if people, and then if people hear that the people who are being swept out of those those encampment areas, they'll say like, oh well, see, they don't even want help, and they don't understand why those things happen, because if they had experienced it, they would know why. It's pretty simple, like, why people would rather have a tent community than be in a fucking shelter. It's because there's a lot of issues with shelters, and they are very unsafe. They're also like you do have a lot of illnesses that go around, even without the COVID stuff. Like, the only time I was sick when I was homeless was when I tried to stay in a shelter. Like, I got pretty damn sick, and that's like the last thing you need if you're like living on the street and all that and trying to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, and frankly, yeah, there's a lot of things. There's, like I said, there's community. If you're in a tent, like, you can have community. You can have something that's your own, which you don't have if you're staying in shelters. Like, you don't get anything. Like, you just get like a mat on a floor of a gym or of a church, rec room for the night, and then you don't have any sense of permanence. You have no sense of like feeling like you belong anywhere. Like, even just having a tent somewhere set up can make a person feel like they have something to go home to, frankly, and that is, and people, again, the assumption by people who've never experienced that is just like, they don't take that into consideration at all. Like, there is like that idea that they should just be happy with like whatever they're given, and they just don't want to have to see the tents. They don't want to have to see homelessness on the street, and so they just do what they're told by the state or the city or whatever it is, and go into these shelters, because yeah, it is like out of sight, out of mind, right? It's better for the people who don't care and don't want to see those people. So there are real things about experience that can't always be like imagined by a person who hasn't actually been through those things. And that's just something I wanted to put out there, and kind of just draw attention to that, because it's really, it makes a big difference. Like I said, like, even I had all these misconceptions, and I wasn't coming from some like suburban upper middle class background either. So there's a lot people don't know, and I think a lot of people are not realistic with their limitations, or not humble enough to admit like when they don't know something, or if they don't understand something, and just want to like have all these preconceived notions. And again, it's just pretty irritating. But I mean, frankly, like, all I wanted to say about all that is that I'm actually pretty grateful to have experienced those things, because now I really have a firm grounding in reality. Like, I know what I'm about. Like, I know what this world, I mean, at least this society is about. Like, I don't, it really says it all. Like, when having seen, the things I've seen and experienced those things, like, yeah, I mean, I just know the reality now, and I'm probably in a better position, even just psychologically, to deal with uncertainties. And I mean, even over the last few years since 2020, like, seeing all the obviously all the talk about how people are stressed and traumatized by what was going on. And frankly, I was pretty chill the whole time, because like, to me, it was not a big, it wasn't anything to me, frankly. I'm not saying that to disrespect anyone who had whatever issues happen, whether it was like, actually getting ill or whatever it is, whatever the case may be. But or having issues from not having social connections with the lockdowns or anything. But I don't know, it's just different. It does build up like a resistance, like kind of like that idea of like um metal being like soldered in a flame. Like you do become stronger from these experiences. And yeah, I mean, I really didn't think a couple years ago that I would ever say that those struggles and the suffering that I did feel at the time are a gift. But to be honest, like I really do. Like, I really do feel grateful about it. Like not trying to oversell it or be, um I'm not saying that just to say, like I really mean that. Because I mean, it's yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be, where I am, which is I feel like I'm in a pretty good place just mentally compared to a lot of people. I mean, as I just mentioned, like yeah, a lot of people are in a really bad place, after the last couple years. And I'm able to just kind of like, I don't know, just kind of keep things going and not really be super affected by everything that happens, or every headline or what have you. So I just wanted to put that out there. And yeah, I think that's all I had for today. And yeah, anytime, whatever time you're watching this, thanks for watching. If you or listening, if you listen to this whole rant, I really don't know how cohesive that was, but I'm glad to like just get those thoughts out there, because like some of them I have been holding on to for a long time. And like I said, I think I do have like a perspective that is different from the typical paradigm, this dichotomy, woke, anti-woke, just making fun of each other, or yeah, I mean, just for the sake of making fun of them, and feeling superior because of thinking they have these traditional values. And ultimately there's just no evidence that it's even that different, like in effect. Like in the effect of all the people who make fun of the you know I mean, in terms of like, from the perspective of like the traditionalist, I'm not saying like everyone who's made fun of them, because I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to make fun of them, but it is kind of funny. I don't know, but I mean, hopefully folks who because there are, like I said, there are other people with like leftist politics or whatever you want to say, who have issues with that, and so they're not coming from the same place. But like I said, as far as that dichotomy of just woke, anti-woke, it's just a mess. And they can, some of those folks really need to like look in the mirror, really. Because as the Society of Spectacle thing shows, like a lot of, I don't know if most people in society know how to be genuine. I mean, that's kind of the main problem. you know all of it's performative, like left, right, and center. It's all a fucking spectacle. That's really what it is at this point. So I don't know if there's any reality left out there, if there's a way for folks to get connected with that genuine like being of themselves, like on all sides. I don't know. I mean, but it's certainly lacking. So with that, I will end here. So thanks for listening.